Good evening, my name is Simon, I'm the game director here at Far North Entertainment. Welcome to Devlog number 3, Teamwork. This devlog will be about the two things we've mainly worked on since last week. The first one being the evaluation of the prototype, and the second one being the investigation of the possibilities for future concept development. Since last Wednesday, a total of 10 people have visited us in our office in order to play the game and give us much needed feedback. This has resulted in a plethora of valuable suggestions and topics of consideration that we bring into the next phase of the project. The feedback could roughly be divided into two categories, with the first category being suggestions for mechanics and features for the game. And some examples of such features are flamethrowers, grenades, chainsaws, stuff like environmental destruction. People often asked if they could blow up walls and doors, for example. We also have a lot of suggestions for how the zombies should react to the player's presence, how they hear and how they see, how they move around the map, and how the players can use their awareness, their hearing and their sight in order to manipulate them and draw advantage from, for example, making sound across the map in order to move the zombie hordes there, etc. And then we also have suggestions like, for example, interface elements like a statistics screen so that you can compare with your friends how many zombies you have shot, for example, and a lot more. We have also got a lot of considerations and questions that have really opened our eyes in how we think about the game and how we move forward from here. And some examples of such considerations are, for example, how does the game encourage teamwork? And what is the larger scope and goal of the game other than just killing zombies and enemies? Another question was, what is the optimal tempo in the game? Is it just a slaughter fest where you run through hordes of zombies with massive weapons? Or is it a more slow-paced, strategic kind of thinking going on? And another example would be if the features of the game will be generated or pre-built by hand. Apart from getting a lot of good ideas for features and mechanics, and also getting some relevant questions that need to be answered, we most notably verified that one of the primary goals of the prototype was met, to some degree at least. And this was the emergence of communication and collaboration between players during gameplay. So this is something we are really satisfied with, that we managed to get that feeling of you really need to communicate with your friends or everything will go south, basically. And now we go into the concept discussion part of the devlog. And first I just want to bring up this thing about establishing a consensus regarding the nature of the final game. And this is highly important in order to make sure that all of our team members are actually working on the same product. Reaching such conclusions is rather tricky, however, especially since the members of the team do not share the exact same profile as gamers. We have different favorite games and we vary somewhat in what kind of games we play. Some of us are more into adventure fantasy games, some of us are more into competitive games like Counter-Strike, for example. And this has made it hard for us to find the exact common ground, so to speak. One of the methods that we used was a method based on the psychological Big 5 personality traits. And from those traits we could derive graphs with different axes. And then we put ourselves into those axes in order to see what we all perceived the final game to be. And so in this first graph here we have the harmony graph. And you can see here that we all end up in the same quadrant, which is very good. So we could early on determine that everyone in the team agree upon that we are making a game which is more heavy on the mechanics rather than storytelling and stuff like that. And it is also primarily a team game and not a player versus player environment. So moving on to the stimulation graph, we have two new axes, and these axes are solo versus multiplayer and serenity versus excitement. And as we can see here, all of us pretty much jumped directly to an exciting multiplayer experience, while Kevin reside in the middle. So there's not much disagreement here really. Far North Z will be a multiplayer game first and foremost, and it will be exciting rather than relaxing. So you will be on the edge of your seat and a lot of stuff will happen that you will need to figure out all the time pretty much. The tempo will be fairly high. And now we delve into the graphs that we did not agree upon that much. And the first one is the challenge graph. And this graph has the axis of skilled play versus less skilled play and work play versus impulse play. Skilled play of course implies that a player that is good at the game and has a lot of skills will be better at generating value within the game. And impulse play and work play relates to how much decision making is involved, or conscious decision making, versus if you just get stuff thrown at you all the time, you need to respond fast and quickly. And here the ideas vary much more in what we are trying to do with this game. Anders, Jimmy and Richard are all in the top right quadrant, kind of. And they want to make a game that requires some skills in order to be effective at playing it. And also that it is primarily oriented towards work play, which is basically, as I described earlier, strategic thinking and decision making and so on. I was more in the bottom left quadrant here, and I wanted to make a game that was more action filled to some degree, that it would be more about responding quickly and subconsciously to the different threats that you are exposed to all the time. And also me and Kevin both agreed that the game should not be too focused on being a skilled player, but rather that everyone that joins the game, even people who play the game for the first time, should have some chance to benefit the group in major ways. And then we come to the graph that in hindsight made us very happy that we did this exercise. Because as we see the player pins moving across the graph, we are not synced at all. We are completely divergent when it comes to these two axes. In this graph, the vertical axis is realism versus fantasy. And a good example to illustrate the difference is, for example, PUBG and Fortnite. Like in Fortnite you can do crazy stuff like shooting your gun while building a big tower and, you know, standing on a rocket, flying with it and stuff like that. While PUBG is more slow paced and actually makes sense from a real world perspective. And here both me and Jimmy are far down on the graph. We want to make a game that is more realistic, while Kevin, Anders and Richard are more prone to the crazy stuff category. And then we have the builds versus explores axis. And here we are also very split. Me and Kevin are more into the building aspects of the game, like building your character, building your base, etc. While Richard is more towards the exploring of the world aspect of it. So here we really had a big discussion of what we want to do. What is the game's main focus? Because of course there will be building of some kind and there will be exploration. But we need to actually pin down, you know, what is the main core of the game. Except for the shooting of zombies, that is. Based on this discussion we came up with two different concepts, basically. The first one was a linear action game, like a cooperative action game like Left 4 Dead, or maybe even a cooperative roguelike, with power-ups and character progression and semi-scripted missions. And it would be more oriented towards fast reactions and impulse play, you know, well-placed grenades and a high tempo. The second concept, and the one that we will be focusing on initially after this week, is more of an open sandbox survival game, more like Starbound or Minecraft or even DayZ, you know. In this case, for the multiplayer setting, you would host a server and then people can join and leave as they please. And of course this means that the tempo will be a bit lower, it will be more tactical and strategical, with a focus on decision making and resource management. There will be some kind of crafting system and base building system. And yeah, as mentioned, this is the concept that we will be pursuing initially. And that's pretty much it for this week's devlog. Although I haven't talked much about the prototype itself, I hope that you found some of the discussions and the graphs and stuff somewhat interesting, so that you get a hint of what we are thinking behind the scenes when we are making the prototype features that will come in the near future. I hope that you will join us here at this channel. Just hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so that you get notifications when we upload next week's devlog and the devlog after that and so forth. So as mentioned before, hope to see you next week. Simon out.